What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the SFS channel and welcome to Draft Week. This week from Tuesday running until Friday, I will have mock drafts coming out every single day to conclude the fantasy football draft season before we get into the NFL season. So NFL kickoff is next week, September the 10th on Thursday Night Football. It is Chiefs versus Texans. So if you guys are excited for that and are looking for some mock drafts to help guide you through your last few fantasy league drafts this season, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for all the videos I'll have coming out this week. Everything this week going forward will be fantasy football related. So if you guys are into that, stay tuned and let's get into the mock draft. All right, we're back on the old reliable Sleeper Fantasy app, and we're not going to waste any time, and I'm going to get straight into it here. A couple things have went on in the last few days that are quite noteworthy for fantasy football. So Alvin Kamara, who was my undisputed third overall pick if I had the spot, or even sometimes in PPR leagues, I was taking him at the second spot in my drafts. He's been rumored to be holding out for contract situations, so a bit of a slip there on my board for him. So I'm not too comfortable or confident picking him there at the third spot. So I would move Kamara down your board a few slots until the Saints give him that contract or he's moved elsewhere, if that is the scenario that we see play out. And also, just a little Leonard Fournette update here. So Michael Thomas actually went first overall in this PPR draft, which is quite surprising to me, and then followed by McCaffrey, who I think should be going first in every league regardless of scoring. So due to this being a PPR league, I'm actually going to pick Barkley here. I've got Saquon Barkley as my RB3 behind Alvin Kamara, and since Alvin Kamara is holding out, I'm going to push Barkley for the time being ahead of him. So that's why I'm going there with this move. Otherwise, I would have 100% went Alvin Kamara at the 1-3 or even 1-2 in a PPR league. So back here in the second round, I've already went running back once, but the board went RB heavy. So I'm not too in love with any of the running backs left. Anyways, I'll get into the Leonard Fournette news here. So Fournette obviously got cut. He's not on a team anymore, so you don't want to be drafting him at all at the moment because you have no idea what situation he's going to land in. And you just don't want that burden and that headache on your team. So I'm completely avoiding Leonard Fournette for the foreseeable future. So I'll be looking to pick a back not named Fournette or Kamara in these first three rounds here. And I'm actually going to go with Chris Carson here at the back end of the second round. Chris Carson was the running back last season with the most games of 20-plus touches. And volume in fantasy football is extremely important. So if you got a guy who's getting volume, especially at the running back position, and a guy who can be efficient with those touches, you've got yourself a great player and someone that could be an absolute stud on your team for you. So getting Chris Carson at the end of the second round, he's not my ideal second-round running back because I like some of these guys that went here. Aaron Jones I'd have taken before him, or even Chubb or Mixon. I'm not a huge Drake guy, so that would have been kind of a toss-up for me. But Chris Carson is a guy I'm comfortable with there, and I'm not exactly in love with the pick, but you have to hit your running backs early this year, and he was kind of the best available workhorse on the board in my opinion. So now getting into the third round, I've got kind of a choice to make for myself here. Do I want to go running back again, or do I want to turn around and get a wide receiver? And the wide receivers on the board right now, I'm not exactly huge on at this spot in the third round, but as a third-round pick in general, Allen Robinson is a guy who, in PPR leagues especially, I think is going to be an all-out monster. So I'm going to take Allen Robinson there at the top of the third round as my wide receiver one. I think Robinson is a player who gets a guaranteed 140 targets this season, and if he gets any consistency out of his quarterbacks, he's going to be an absolute freak in fantasy football and in the NFL, to be honest. He is extremely athletic, and he has insane size and frame, so he just is able to win at the point of attack and all over the field. So give me Allen Robinson every single time in the third round if you've already got those top two running back spots locked up. Here in the fourth round, I'm going to fade receiver then. Receiver in the 4th round is kind of a gray area for me, in a spot where I think it's a bit of a reach to take some of these guys because I can get the same value later on down the board. So I'm going to be going after a running back here, and the guy that I actually like most on the board at this spot is probably DeAndre Swift, and he seems like kind of a reach over some of these guys, but Kareem Hunt is not going to be starting, so he's not going to get that volume. He'll get pass catching work, which is nice for PPR, obviously, but just not having the rushing attempts and volume is kind of a concern for me. And then Ronald Jones, it's an extremely crowded backfield. He's the guy I would like in that backfield, but I don't see his upside being as high as the guy I'd like. Cam Akers seems like kind of a standard play to me in his rookie season, and Leonard Fournette is actually rumored, like one of his landing spots is the LA Rams, so I would hate to get stuck in that situation. So where I'm actually going to go is a place where I'm already kind of comfortable and confident in seeing how that backfield's going to play out, and that's DeAndre Swift with the Detroit Lions. So Swift is a guy I've been picking a lot recently. I see DeAndre Swift getting about 10 to 12 touches per game, and about 4 or 5 of those being passing targets. And Swift's a complete back that I see just dominating all over the field because of his versatile skill set and his ability to win after the catch or after the carry and get yards after contact or yards after the catch. So Swift is a guy who can make explosive plays happen, and I want everything to do with DeAndre Swift in these middle rounds here, and especially being a flex play as my RB3. I think he's a great person to have on the team. And then I'm going to turn around and hit on the running back position again, and I'm going to go J.K. Dobbins here. And again, it seems like a bit of a risk and a reach, but at this spot for me, I don't think so. Especially having 2 rookies that I think could hit and be league winners back-to-back is huge. So J.K. Dobbins, actually a report just came out from Sleeper today that J.K. Dobbins is rumored to have a massive role in a major role on that Ravens offense, and running behind that offensive line with all those weapons and Lamar Jackson obviously being the main rushing threat, I think that Dobbins has a incredible ceiling because he'll have the opportunity to put up massive numbers and nothing will be standing in J.K. Dobbins' way. So J.K. Dobbins is a great player I like in the 5th round. If you can get him in the 6th round, that's even better. But I saw the running back group slightly decreasing, and I wanted to make sure I got my guys. So here I am in the 6th round now, and what I'm thinking here is Will Fuller, Julian Edelman, or Tyler Boyd. And since this is a PPR league, I'm going to go with Julian Edelman. So Edelman is a guy I had last year in a standard league, and I used him as my wide receiver 1, and I ended up getting 2nd place. Edelman was actually kind of the anchor of my team, as strange as that sounds. He was getting touchdowns and a ridiculous amount of targets from Tom Brady last season. I think that he has the potential to not quite do that again this season with Cam Newton, but I think that he has the potential to be Cam Newton's favorite target in New England. So Julian Edelman is a great player that I think will have a great role on that Patriots offense again this season. His main concern, I would say, is injuries and staying on the field and healthy. But as a wide receiver 2 in a PPR league, Julian Edelman is an extremely high upside pick, and I think he's got kind of a safe floor as well because he gets those short receptions, and that's a free point right there. So, and then coming right back here, I can go wide receiver again, and I'm actually going to go Tyler Boyd, who I think I've picked in my last 3 mock drafts, if I'm being completely honest. Tyler Boyd is a guy who is extremely consistent, and that can't be understated in fantasy. Having a safe floor player in your starting lineup is incredibly valuable and kind of prevents you from losing the week. Tyler Boyd might not necessarily win you a lot of weeks, but I think that he's a guy who Joe Burrow has already said he feels a strong connection with and is very comfortable throwing him the football. And if Tyler Boyd is able to haul in 100-ish targets and 1,000 yards with around 8 to 10 touchdowns, I think Tyler Boyd can finish as a wide receiver 2 and a player that you can start without feeling like he might bust and lose you the week, and that's incredibly valuable. Now into the 8th round, here's when I start to kind of like looking at quarterbacks here, and I've actually been picking Matt Ryan a lot as well. I think Matt Ryan is a great prospect for 2020 fantasy football because of that division that he's in. The offenses in the NFC South are ridiculous, and the Falcons' defense is not so strong. So I think the Falcons will be playing out of a lot of deficits this season, and they'll be trying to catch up. And in doing so, they're going to be throwing the football a lot. And when you throw the football, you score a lot of fantasy points as a quarterback. So with Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst, Todd Gurley, all as weapons for that Falcons offense, I think that Matt Ryan has a tremendous ceiling and a very safe floor. So he's a guy that I love as my QB1 in fantasy football this season. And I'm snatching up in the 8th round and on whenever I can. Now, here we are in the 9th round, and I just took a player who is probably shooting up draft boards right now, and that's Latavius Murray, and for a very valid reason. Obviously, I talked about at the beginning of the episode how Alvin Kamara's holdout is going to affect his value and his team, but it's also going to have a huge impact on Murray's value. So Latavius Murray is an RB1 when he's starting for his team. So Murray will be used as a workhorse by Sean Payton when Kamara is not on the field, and I want everything to do with him if Kamara is not out there, because Murray will get all the goal line carries. He'll have the passing work. He'll have every opportunity in the world to be an RB1 if Alvin Kamara isn't on that field week 1. So give me Latavius Murray every time. However, I took him in the 9th round here. By the end of the week, his ADP could be far higher, and it could be a player that you end up picking, and then Kamara comes back, and it's just a wasted pick for you, and you're going to really regret buying on Latavius Murray. So draft Murray cautiously, just like you would with Kamara, and hold off on reaching too high for him because of his upside before you know for a fact whether Kamara is going to be on the field week 1 or not. Here in the 10th round, I would have actually loved to go Jared Cook here, but he went at the top of the 10th, so that's a little disappointing for me. I was actually hoping that I would have been able to snatch him up there, but that's all right. I'll just fade tight end until later in the draft because there's a couple of names that I really like that you can get in the super late rounds of your fantasy drafts this season. If you want to go that route. However, I have stated before and on a frequent occasion, I much prefer getting a top-tier tight end at the start of the draft. Mark Andrews is kind of my favorite guy, along with Zach Ertz, getting them in that 3rd to 4th round range, maybe even 5th. But here in the 10th round, I went Adrian Peterson, just another running back to add value to that group, add some depth, and not much analysis there. Darius Geis is gone now, and he's really the only solidified name in that backfield, so can't go wrong with Adrian Peterson, especially this late in the draft. Now in the 11th round, I think it's time to go wide receiver again, so I'm going to go with the number 1 for the New York Giants, or at least in my opinion, the number 1 on that team, and that's Sterling Shepard. Shepard doesn't necessarily have a huge ceiling, but I think he has the safest floor of the Giants wide receivers. Darius Slayton tends to boom on some weeks, but he also busts quite frequently, and that can be really frustrating if you're trying to play him in your lineup. So I really like Darius Slayton, but their ADPs are so similar that it makes me want to go after Sterling Shepard every chance I get. And actually, Slayton went before Shepard in this mock draft, but I would flip it. I would 100% take Shepard prior to drafting Slayton, and I know that issues with injuries are a legitimate factor in Shepard's ADP, but those concussions specifically, but I'm taking Shepard first every time, and I think that it's valid why. Here in the 12th round, I'm going to round out my running back group with a handcuff that I really like, and that's Justin Jackson. I've been picking him in my mock drafts as well. Justin Jackson is a player who I think has a really nice ceiling and floor, regardless of if he's the starter or not in LA. Austin Eckler clearly has that role to himself, and he is used as a pass and run weapon for that team. But Justin Jackson is a guy who, when Austin Eckler lines up in the slot, comes into the backfield, and he's a very effective runner. Justin Jackson has made some nice explosive plays in his career and has gotten in the end zone a few times, and that's a player that I would like to have on my team. If he is able to take over the reins as the full-time starter, if something were to happen to Eckler, Justin Jackson is another guy who I think has the talent to be an RB1 immediately. He's got the running style and the efficiency to be an extremely impactful fantasy player, and I really like Justin Jackson as a fantasy prospect this season. Here in the 13th round, I'm going to go back for another quarterback that I think has a chance to be very fantasy relevant, and that's Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans. Tannehill is not necessarily a volume passer per se, but as a player for the Titans, he's extremely efficient because Derrick Henry allows the Titans to excel highly at the play-action passing game. Tannehill, it doesn't take much for Ryan Tannehill to burst a play wide open. They run the ball 5 plays in a row with Derrick Henry and average 5 yards a play on those carries, and then all of a sudden they fake another carry and go with the play action game, and Tannehill hits A.J. Brown over the top for a 50-yard score. It's that easy because of how effective their run game is, and it allows Ryan Tannehill to only throw 12 to 15 passes a game and still be fantasy relevant because he's scoring touchdowns effortlessly because of how focused in on the run game the defenses are. 14th round, I think it's a perfect time to take my first tight end, and I'm going to go with Chris Herndon. The reports have been out that Herndon is Darnold's favorite target at camp, and this late in the draft, you really can't go wrong with him. I needed a starting tight end, and Chris Herndon certainly has tight end 1 upside if he's able to stay healthy this season and be on the field with Darnold. I could see Chris Herndon finishing as a top 5 tight end if he's able to get the volume that I think he could have if he stays on the field for all 16 games. I think that Chris Herndon is a very talented tight end, and as a pass catcher, he can do a lot of things for the Jets. Here in round 15, I'm going to go back and take a defense before the group gets too thin here. I'm actually going to go the Minnesota Vikings for my defense here after they just traded for Yannick Ngakoue from the Jacksonville Jaguars. That pass rush in Minnesota is going to be scary, and they're going to get a lot of sacks. So, and then sacks and pass rush pressure turns into turnovers, so they kind of go hand in hand. So that group is actually going to probably be very efficient again in 2020. Mike Zimmer defenses are always great, but adding that extra pass rush talent is going to really help that defensive line and the young secondary, so I think that move does a lot for the Vikings. Last skill position pick here to round out my draft, I'm actually going to go with Robbie Anderson of the Carolina Panthers to kind of top off that wide receiver group. Robbie Anderson's ceiling allows him to put up wide receiver 1 numbers on a given week, so he's a guy that I really enjoy playing at times. He's kind of a frustrating player at others, though, because he often does have games where he has minimal catches and doesn't really produce with them, but he's definitely a guy who I would say has the potential to erupt on any given week more than Curtis Samuel would and really take over a week in fantasy football. And then here with our last pick, nothing really exciting about this, just a kicker. I'm going to pick Young-Ho Koo for the Atlanta Falcons. Koo is the onside kick master. He pulled off a variety of onside kicks in one game against the Saints, I believe, at the end of last season. So he's a little bit of a magician there. But just a quick overview of the team here. You can see we've got Ryan and Tannehill at quarterback. Pretty strong running back group. I've got 2 established veterans and then 2 high upside rookies that I really like. And then going into the wide receiver group, I really like those first 3, Allen Robinson, Julian Edelman, and Tyler Boyd. I think those are extremely good players and a really solid group for me there. And then down here on the bench, I've got some nice running backs to add depth if someone gets hurt, or if a holdout lasts, I'll have another RB1 on my hands, and I can potentially make a trade to snag some other value at other positions that I might be lacking in. So that'll do it for today's draft. If you enjoyed today's first episode of Draft Week, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. SFS puts out daily football content. I do team analysis, Madden 21, and fantasy football videos. So if you guys are into any of that, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stick around here. It'd be really appreciated. If you just have a couple seconds to go down and do that, it would mean the world. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.